Somebody call the fire department to get the cats out of the tree. Oh. You look good. You look perfect. Yeah, it's not showing on YouTube. Or they will still be in their office and you can still access it.
Testing, testing.
Have a look, but if you have a moment, yeah.
Oh, is it? I shut this off. What should I be
Click
doing?
on WebEx there.
On
You want to
which?
do sound off, this one? WebEx?
Yeah.
Everybody have a great Happy New Year. Everybody have a good break.
I was about to say thank you, Mr. Chair, but seeing as I'm Mr. Chair, I'll say thank you, Mike. And we'll go ahead. And good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of 2023. And may I take this opportunity to wish everyone a very happy and safe new year. I also take this opportunity to acknowledge that for thousands of years, we have walked on the unceded territories of the Quw'utsun, Malahat, Subaset, Halalt, Penelakut, Snanimus, Liaxan, Pocachin, Ditidat, and Pachidat peoples, and where we now work. And with that, we'll get on to the agenda. Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Approval of your agenda. A motion to approve the agenda as circulated.
Moved and seconded. Moved by Director Seagull and seconded by Director McClinton. You've got Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next on the agenda, public input period. And I understand that we have somebody here in person in the gallery that would like to take a few minutes of the committee's time.
Mr. Evans, welcome, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Chair, I am Cliff Evans from the Shawnigan Lake Basin Society, and our job is to protect the environment and the water, and we provide a service for the CVRD, and this service is listed under bylaw 3737 function 488. And Mr. Chair, I don't see this on the budget this year, and it hasn't been on the budget for a few years. And it should be on the budget because we do provide a really necessary service to protect the environment. We check the weir for height every month, and we check the lake and Shawnigan Lake, and sometimes there's quite a difference in heights. So if there is a difference, we go along the river and we check things out. And I believe we have only one photo. I hope to, I had a whole group of photos to show the new directors so they could see some of the things we do. And when we're talking about the SIA or contaminated soil site, you would know what we're talking about. I think a picture is worth 1,000 years. On the 2nd of January, we went to the weir. We saw the weir was at 116.142 meters above sea level. But the lake was at 120.4 meters above sea level. So we knew there's a problem, and if you look at this photo here, and I don't know if you can zoom in more on it, it shows a dock that has come in front of, and this is the outlet to Shawnigan Lake into Shawnigan Creek, and what you see in the corner, right corner, is the bridge on the Port Renfrew Road. In the distance, there are some fiberglass floats which are supposed to keep all the trash on the lake side, and the trash shouldn't be going down the creek. And I hope that I'll have all these photos for you tomorrow and can give you a quick run through on it. But what I would like to do is see function 488 put on the budget. It's not on there right now. And I would like you to support us, and I'll try to give you a better idea of some of the places we go and where they are in around Shawnigan Lake. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Is anyone else?
Hi, Sheila Bell Irving, Shawnigan Lake. Most of you know me as the frontline person of the toxic soil dump, so I know exactly what's coming into our lake every time it rains. That I'm speaking for function 488, 3737 bylaw, the Shawnigan Basin Society, because that office was integral for what we did in Shawnigan to stop and get that permit pulled. That office was used as our headquarters for strategy planning. It was used for trauma counseling, as most of the women that were on the front line, because it was mostly women, were getting broken. And we had trauma counseling around that very large, beautiful table that's in that office, and Director Acton was a member of that. We have used that office for helping community members that have come to us because nobody else will help them. And they have an illegal dump next door to them that is now poisoning their well. We have helped people who have come to us in distress because there's logging going on and nobody's stopping anything. We have been there for the community. We know the community, they know us. That office is important for the people who are in distress to be able to come to us, because we have a board members that are so knowledgeable. I've never seen so many smart people around a table that are volunteering their time. We do this all out of our own volunteer time. I personally make floating gardens that clean the water and suck in the contaminants. I do it all on my own. It would be really lovely if we could get our funding back again so that we could start doing this on a grander scale and not having it come out of my bank account. We need the funding. We are a watershed in distress. My property taxes are $10,000 a year. I'm not joking. $10,000 a year I pay in property taxes. I voted for Function 488. I was willing to give part of that $10,000 to protect my watershed that I look at every day, swim in every day of the summer. My last day of swimming this year was on Thanksgiving Day. You have no idea the joy that it brought me to swim on Thanksgiving Day in my lake. The fact of the matter is I pay $10,000 for functions I don't even use. I would like to be able to know that my $10,000 that I pay every year is going to go towards a function that actually supports my watershed, cleans the water. The people on this board are willing to give up their lives, like myself, to make sure that that water is clean and drinkable for my grandchildren and their grandchildren. My property's been in my family for 82 years. The last thing I want to be able to see is my children not being able to swim in the lake. The day that pit breached, my dogs refused to drink the water. For 2 years, my dogs refused to drink that water. I want to be able to know and assure my children and my grandchildren that they can drink that water. And we need help, and we need the CVRD to help us. And we need that funding restored to us. Please do the right thing and give us our function back again. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Kim?
Thank you, Chair, and to all the leaders around these tables who selflessly serve the community. My name is Kim Bernard. I represent the Shawnigan Rotary Eco Club, the first of its kind in Canada, and I stepped forward to serve at the Basin Society for 6 months last year, from May to November, as their part-time admin assistant, their frontline person in the office, greeting the community, and their communications facilitator, as well as promoter and fundraiser, because I actually had to fundraise for my wages in that position, and it broke my heart to step away from it because I didn't want to see the society go into the red even further than it already had, to be able to extend its work amongst the community. And so I believe these talented volunteers deserve your support for the watershed function, the oversight they provide, the community engagement and liaison work that they provide. Plus, it's a tremendous community location. I personally have facilitated numerous uses of this room, including the ongoing gaming community amongst the 20-something-year-olds who gather together in much-needed fellowship and friendship that we all want to facilitate. And these are our up-and-coming leaders who are seeing the work that's being done in this space. So I also stand in the shadow of these mighty volunteers and would plead with you to restore the funding to this society. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Barnard. Is there anyone else? I don't think so in the public gallery. Mr. Robbins, some guidance here. Am I allowed to comment on anything that was just said, or should I just acknowledge that we've heard?
I leave that to you, Mr. Chair. The tradition is that you've been provided some input for your consideration.
Thank you. Yeah, I've just got a couple of sentences here. I do appreciate the words that you're saying here, and I do share the concerns that that you have. I do believe that SBS does extremely valuable community work in the Lakeside community. Unfortunately, the director of the area is not here today to comment on this, and it would not be fully appropriate to take this any further at this time. So with all due respect, I'm going to leave this with the committee for further consideration and to wait until the director for the area is here. Thank you. Mr. Robbins?
Mr. Chair, the main item on your agenda, Section 3 reports. R1 is a report from the Finance Division with regards to Function 250. That's Electoral Area Services 2023 budget. The recommendation, we're seeking some direction, and Finance has a prepared presentation for you on Function 250.
Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in advance of the presentation from staff, and I'm noting that a little difference, and I'm not sure whether I can refer back to last year or which year we actually did things a little bit differently, and the issue that I raise is that we've got Function 250 in front of us today, 250 alone. That's the documentation and the material that we got, so that's what we're discussing today. a significant portion of our budget is going to be discussed at committee of the whole. And my understanding and the process that I've been accustomed to, which is just sort of makes more common sense, is those functions that are electoral area specific are a budget function should be discussed at electoral area services as opposed to a committee of the whole. Now, the argument can be made that they're fiscal decisions and the likes, but I think that as electoral area directors that know the functions that we pay into and that we tax from, I'd be far more comfortable with functions that are solely the jurisdiction of the electoral areas being discussed at the Electoral Area Services Committee, and Function 488 is a perfect example. I don't know that our municipal partners need to spend the time and the effort and the energy on those functions that are exclusive to electoral areas. So I don't know what staff have in mind as far as the next meetings go, but I'm far more inclined, and I think the rest of us would be as well, I don't want to speak for you, to consider electoral area specific budgets at an electoral area services committee, and then we make recommendations directly to the board on the basis of our collective decisions, our recommendations around there. So I'll leave it with that, leave it at that, Mr. Chair, and perhaps we can have some discussion at the end of the meeting after we've considered 250. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Director Morrison, and I'm in complete agreement. I agree. Not that we want to alienate anybody of our municipal partners, but in this particular case, yeah, we can look at what we deal with on a EASC basis and make the recommendations to the committee of the whole with the hope that they will go along with what we think. But thank you for that. Thank you, and I think Ms. Bowen, you're next. And before you start, thank you very much for all the time you gave me yesterday to run through this stuff again. I do appreciate it.
So through the chair to Director Morrison, we will be bringing this 250 will go as a report to the Electoral Area Services meeting next Thursday. So you guys will discuss it before it goes to the committee of the whole for them to do the final on it. So yeah, we would not be bringing it to the committee of the whole. You would go to the Electoral Area Services, the same as what we do with all the other ones. I don't really have a presentation. I only have the information that's in the report. So if you want me to bring it up on screen, I can, if you want to discuss it.
Yeah, if you would, please. I've got it on my screen. I've also got a print out here, okay. But it would be useful for those in the community to be able to see what we're talking about.
Okay. Yep, Chase. Yep. Okay. So, how do I do that? So this is attachment A that everybody has in their package. And so what I did is I took the last couple years, so that 19, 20, 2021, showed your actual amounts that you used. 2022, we have the actual budget first. Then we have 2022. What we have as actuals up to the date that I did the report. And then 2023 is what has been proposed. And then the last column is the change between the budgets, not the actuals. The actuals are only there to show you what's kind of happened for the year. But that last column is comparison to what you budgeted for the 2022 and then what's been budgeted for 2023 and the change. So in the top section, those are your revenues. So if it has a bracket around it, that means that the revenue is going up. And if it has no bracket, that's going down. And then the opposite is for the bottom part, for all the expenses that start at the general and go all the way to the end, those are your expenses. And again, if it's a positive number, the expense is going up. If it's a negative number, that means the expense has been decreased. So are there any particular ones you want to discuss or have questions about in there? Because there's the general operating ones, and then we have the change. What page is this? change going to the next page, which was, the elections have come out because the elections was only for 2022, so then there's a big drop there for the elections because it's come out. Why is the page not going there? There it is.
Through the chair, I'm interested in why community information has been dropped entirely. Not entirely, but significantly.
Thank you. Okay, so the community, this is the one that's dropped, that you're saying dropped 41,000. This has been, so the 54,000 is 9,000 per electoral area director. So you have $9,000 to spend for the community information. So that's why it dropped. There was a time that it increased over the budgets, and then there was a decision last year that it would be it, and then this year would decrease back down to 9,000 per electoral area director. So.
For somebody new to this, are you able to expand on what we can do with $9,000?
Through the chair to Director Abbott, there's going to be more information coming out regarding what is going to fit within that community information section. And it's usually stuff to advertise within your local electoral area that's out and above, different than what the CVRD has already put out. And I know that there's going to be something coming about getting more detail to you guys of what that is going to involve.
Thank you.
Am I seeing anyone else? I have something that I would like to ask. Director Seagal.
Yeah, for a newbie, I feel like there's probably a lot of questions I should ask and I don't really know what to ask. But could you expand on what the allocation, I'm assuming GIS, the one that's increased by 106,000, is that GIS like maps? And so can you just elaborate like what that even, what that means? Thank you.
Through the chair to Director Segal, I'll have to look that up to exactly let you know. Because it's an allocation for the GIS system, and it's something that 250 has been supporting for quite a while as a big chunk. And it does go through, I think it's also part of planning. So I'd have to look in to get more information for you, so I don't give you wrong information.
Yeah, I can take that one if you like, but I see that Ian's got his hand up. Director Morrison, if you'd like to take that one instead.
Well, not specifically the answer, but basically all of our various departments are user pay internally, and Function 250, which is us and land use and planning, uses an awful lot of maps. And, that's a significant cost. But I did have a question about so for newer directors, allocations change a lot, and they drive people crazy at recreation commissions and the like. But this is a pretty significant number, and I'm just wondering, I do know that we had discussions in the past about rolling 3-year averages for allocations, and I'm wondering, is that actually in place, or are we basing it on previous year? Can you give us the formula that is used on allocations? Because that would apply to all of our different allocations internally. And I know the allocation budgets were done like 6 months ago.
Through the chair to Director Morrison. So the allocations are based on expenses from 2 years ago. So like for the 2023 budget, we're basing them on expenses from 2021. So now we're just coming out of COVID, things are starting to increase. So we go back and base it on actuals. So since we're in the middle of doing budgets for 2023, but we're not even completed 2022 yet for knowing actuals, we have to base it on a previous year to figure out what the balances are. So the last couple of years with COVID, the expenses had dropped quite a bit on certain things, so then now we've started to increase on stuff, So then that's why the allocation's gone back up.
So as a follow-up, Mr. Chair, I'm obviously not for the 2023 budget year, but I'm wondering if staff could look at the feasibility of whether a 3-year rolling average might be a better solution to 2 years ago actuals, and it's just we're always trying to take the peaks and valleys out of what might end up being requisition hits or decreases. And I just know from all the times we've, I wouldn't say argued, but debated the issue of allocations, that might be something that would smooth out the peaks and valleys. And I don't know if it's a whole bunch of work, and I don't want to, instigate that for this budget year, but I think that's something that I'd like staff to at least have a cursory look at. Thank you.
Through the chair to Director Morrison, we would have to look into that, and also because we have a policy already done up for allocation budgets and the allocation, we'd have to bring that back to the board on the change on the allocation policy.
Yeah, thank you. Are you finished, Dr. Morrison? Thank you. And Director Martman.
Thank you, and thank you for this. I do have some questions. I'm not sure the timing of when to get the best answers for them. But let's start with just a couple of format pieces. So the 2022 actuals are to what date? You can get back to me on it. I'd like to send the timing of, I'm just curious if it's representing 3/4 of the year or 10 of the 12 months.
Through the chair to Director Martman, I'd say it's probably to the October, because Allison Nelson, who is off right now, she helped me with this one, and she prepared a lot of this, so I'd have to look back to see what date we actually used on that one.
Okay, and we're talking a fiscal year ending
We end in December 31st.
December 31st.
Yeah.
So it may be 3/4 of the year. And then the other piece, and again, around formatting, I'm not used to numbers in parentheses meaning going up. I'm used to see parentheses meaning a negative. So from a layperson's perspective, it's throwing me. So is that necessary, or?
Through the chair to Director Martman, this is set up as an accounting kind of format in the system. We could, but it would it may look funny as the formulas. We'd have to fiddle with the formulas, because you'd have a bunch of positives at the top for your increase in your revenues, and then your positives at the bottom. It may confuse some people looking at it and thinking, well, how do I get all these expenses and revenues? And then if you add them together, but we could look into.
Well, it's just that if I'm a layperson looking at it, if the public's looking at it, I'm looking at it saying, how are they making sense of this? And so I guess that's one of the reasons I bring it up. So when I look at budgets like this, I also know that you've got a comparative document coming up next. I think, if that's correct, under another attachment, about some of the bigger items that are causing a change in the budget. But I would be interested in going through each line item and trying to understand what the differences are for. Because, this is where I get a little bit caught about the timing of it, because some of them are certainly like GIS, when it's going up that substantial amount of money compared to what the budget was previously. I'd like to understand why that is, but there's other ones that are going up, but they're less, but still I'd like to try to understand it. So are you, is this the time to ask that question and have you walk through this document? Or should we be holding on that question?
Through the chair to Director Martman, you can ask those questions. I will try my best to answer with as much information as I do have. The GIS one, I'll have to get back to you on the big increase on that one. But yes, we could go through and I could verify what your questions are with regards to why things went up. It's some of them had to do with, now we are coming out of COVID, and there are going to be more people traveling, more going to conferences, that more in person. So then you're going to have those increases in there. UBCM, the conference, we have it for 9 electoral area directors going. So that's the full. For VICC, same thing, we have 9 budgeted to go.
So maybe we can walk through and we'll get to those, because I feel like we're sort of cherry picking right now.
No, it's.
If that chair may, if we can do that. Because, I think maybe we'll just start with the general expenditures and hit director's regular pay right off the top, which is general I think it's like under the first line, everybody there? It says director's regular pay.
Yep.
And I noticed that, so it's
Director Martman, could I just hold you there for a minute? I'm going to go to Director Nicholson first and find out, and then I'll come back to you, if that's okay? Thank you. Director Nicholson, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. I agree with Director Martman, I was going to suggest that we go through it line by line, recognizing that some lines there's not very much discretion, but there are some things that we need to talk about, like whether the training and development line is appropriate or whether the meeting expenses are appropriate. But, things like the regular pay would be based on what we're currently getting, I assume. And I guess the question there is, we are having a discussion, I believe, in that special committee about governance, and they're going to cover that topic off. So the question is, I guess at that point, if there was some decision made by the board to change that, then that would get inputted into the budget for this year if the timing was right, or it would have to wait for the next year. Is that correct, Ms. Bowen?
Through the chair to Director Nicholson. I'm not sure about the governance meeting on when that's happening. Maybe, I'm not sure if Danielle knows about that. From my perspective, I'm not involved in that one, so I'm not sure how that's going to affect that. So I'm not.
Okay. So in any case, there's some of these line items, the telephone, that's just an estimate of what it's going to cost next year, and telephones are telephones. So we don't need to talk about that. But there are certain lines here that we should really focus on, and it would be good to start at the top and just go through each one, make sure we don't miss anything.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Through the chair, if that is what everybody would like, we'll start at the top.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Two things before we go on. I'll come straight back to you, Director Martman. Excuse me. I take your point about the brackets and things like that, because that's what Tracy and I talked about for a long time. I'm used to pluses and minus signs, and that way it makes it easy. And it is difficult to understand if you're not an accountant. So if there's any other way that we could present this so that people, normal people, the residents, etc., that would be great. And GIS, Director Seagull, if you get a chance to sit down with Mr. Grant up there in the office, very, very powerful, very, very useful, and we'll look at the costs in a minute. But it is one of those things that really is a very powerful tool as far as we're concerned, planning and everything else. Have a sit down with Rob. It's really good. Okay, so where do we go back to? Director Martman. Okay, and we'll go through line by line? Yep.
Okay, we'll start at the top. You have a requisition increase there, so it's going up by 26,781. So that is the 3.12% increase to cover costs. The next item down, the 25,000, this is a decrease in gas tax, because in 2022, the committee decided to give gas tax to another outside company. And so the expense is lower down. There's a $25,000 decrease in your expense in the expense section. So the two cross each other off. So that's why there's a decrease. There's no gas tax, no projects that has been brought forward. So the surplus is based on, at the time we did the report, of how much is surplus is, so we're carried over to keep your requisition down to the 3.12. And then the transfer from operating reserve, this is an $80,000 transfer that goes to GIS to help with the ortho photos that is happening. So that's a rolling 80,000 every year that we transfer over to GIS to put away for their ortho. So that, and the decrease of the 203, 313 that's happening there is that was because that was what was budgeted for the election. So we don't need that in 2023. So down to the next, starting of the general expenses, your director's pay, so that's a 3% increase.
Sorry, maybe just before we go on to expenses, any questions about the revenues section? The revenue line items?
So the question I would have is under the transfer from operating reserves. Can you explain a bit of how that works? Because it seems to me that, is that an optional thing, or is it something that, like, it seems like money's in the reserve and you can move it or not move it. So is that optional? Can we move more, move less?
To
From the
transfer
operating reserve
to GIS?
Yeah, or to any
This for the GIS, I look into when that first started. I'll look back and get that information, but this was an agreement that was happening, and it's like a rolling one. And they're putting money away, so every 3 years they have money to spend to update the orthros. So that's what that 80,000 is. So you can transfer, this is transferring out of your reserve. So the transfer in, which will happen, so what we do is at the end of the year, if you have a surplus, we do carry some forward, which is what that 156 is, or 151 that we're carrying forward, and the rest will automatically go into your operating reserve to be used at a future date. So it's like an automatic at the end of the year when we finish all the budgets and done everything and finish the year end and close off, we know how much everybody has, and then based on what we budgeted, the remainder goes in automatically into an operating reserve.
Director Morrison, sorry, I was looking at the paper down here.
That's all right. Thanks, Mr. Chair. And just for a little clarity, the operating reserve policy that we brought in, it makes a whole bunch of sense, that any surpluses go directly in there. For those of you that remember some of the discussion we've had about the minimums and maximums, they are great ideas, and Ben's, or Director Martman's suggestion as to can you do more or can you do less? Of course, our fine staff are going to tell us that we should and always be within that minimum maximum range, but it is a policy. The board, not us, but the board has the ability and I would say in maybe rarer circumstances to waive that policy if it is deemed to be a necessary expenditure, but the suggestion is that we definitely don't want to be using operating reserve just to reduce the percentage number that we get to as the bottom line at the end of the year. So keep that in mind. It is there. It can be used. There's a range, and only in, I would suggest, fairly extraordinary circumstances should we think about accessing operating reserve for anything other than important projects.
Yeah. And
Yeah, thank you, Director Morrison. That's made things a lot clearer as well.
yeah, through the chair to Director Morrison. The min-maxes are kind of like the minimum is 2 months, having 2 months in you're there so you can cover your expenses, to a maximum of 4 months. So if something happens catastrophic, there's money there to help keep running things and keep things going. And there are functions that once they reach their maximum, they have a lot of room, we move that into capital reserves, but not every function has a capital reserve that we can move that money into. And 250 is one of those ones that doesn't have one. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we'll email everybody a copy of the operating reserve policy, so that you can kind of see what.
It's not easy looking around to see who's got their hands up around here, is it? All these little screens and things. Bear with me, folks, I'll get there in the end. Patrick's doing a great job. Thank you.
Okay, so is that all the questions with regards to the revenue section? We'll move on to the expense section. Okay, so the first line item there in the expenses is director's regular pay. So this, based on this budget right here, is a 3% increase. So we will have to adjust this due to stuff. So that is what that increase is over the last year. So that's the 4,107.
There's me staring at my piece of paper again. Sorry, Ian, carry on, Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I'm stand to be corrected, and just going on memory, I don't have the minutes, but my understanding was that while we are still having the special committee to discuss the various things, that the direction from the previous board was that the anticipated electoral area director regular pay increase was to be included in this budget for our consideration. And I don't see it here. We've got the standard 3. So that was my understanding of the direction of the previous board. So can I just have some clarification, and I don't need it right now, but that's, when the board gives direction to have something included, generally it is. So that's my understanding of where this sat, that it would be debated and discussed here, but it was to be part of the core and initial budget consideration.
Through the Chair, Director Morrison, we actually don't have that direction from the board. So we did a report for the board at the end of August, beginning of September this year, which collated all of the past direction on director salaries. And I believe that report left it open, that there wasn't actually direction given to staff about how to treat director salaries in the upcoming budget. So this budget represents the direction that's in the bylaw, which is the matching increase language. And at that time, we didn't have a finalized collective agreement, and subsequent to that, we now do, so this number has to be adjusted a little bit to reflect that. And then there's the ongoing work of the governance committee, which may subsequently adjust this again, but at this time, we have no direction other than to follow the bylaw on director remuneration.
Follow-up, Director Morrison?
So thank you for that, Ms. Mohan, and I'm not often wrong, but I'd stand to be corrected. I was very certain that there was clear direction given to staff, and I'd like to ask if it could be further researched, and I'll do some looking on my own. But I was certain we were going to be considering a number that had been determined would be included in the budget, and it would be simply debating the budget, not the matter. So I'd like some further clarification on that. As I say, I have a very clear recollection of that direction being given. Thank you.
Ms. Mohan, is that something that you can look into for us, please?
Well, one of the things I can do for sure, similar to following the operating reserve policy to everybody, is we can send that report to everybody after the meeting, the one that was asked of staff at the end of the summer. So
Good. Director Abbott, go ahead.
I lost the phone cap. I don't want to dwell on remuneration for directors, but I would like to talk about the mechanics of that line. I don't understand how actual, with 10/12ths of the year being recorded, appears to be 145, and the budget is 141. So 2022 actual, and it's not a full year, it's only 10/12ths?
correct. So the actuals, through the chair to Director Abbott, the actuals reflect a number of different kinds of director remuneration. So, and some of it is meeting dependent for for alternates, et cetera. So it doesn't always, it doesn't always come out exactly as the budget predicts. Sometimes it's greater and sometimes it's lesser. So what we do with the budgeting is we take the prior year's budget, we apply whatever policy or prediction that we have for or direction from the board to the subsequent year. And so the 2023 budget amount reflects direction from the finance department, because we didn't get direction specifically from the board this year on a target. Generally, we look at what contracts we have settled, what kind of the market rates are for wages, et cetera, and we make sort of an estimate of how we should increment wages and salaries, including director remuneration, for the next budget year. And so that's what you're seeing here. It's sort of a policy-driven increase. And then there are some indicators in the bylaw about how we actually adjust salaries. And we're just a little bit behind because the collective agreement wasn't settled until the middle of December this year. So this information doesn't reflect that. And additionally, we've now had direction around the governance committee, which will look at the issue of director remuneration. So there will be likely adjustments to these figures.
Thank you.
Just looking through the little pictures here. Anybody else on this particular subject? No? Okay, then we'll move on. Thank you.
So benefits, we just base it on a percentage of the wages, so it went up a little bit. And then the next line item that comes up, see, there's a zero, we kept the director's expense at the same, so there's no change in that budget. Then we have the communication information, and that's the one that has dropped, and it's gone back now to $9,000 per electoral area director. And then we have conferences. It's hard to keep line item here. It's 9,000, so there's no change. We kept it the same, so it's 1,000 per director. And
just if I could just stop you there, Director Nicholson, go ahead.
Thank you. So these are some lines that we might want to talk about a little bit more. So I would like some clarification on what is included in director's expenses. The community information, my understanding is when we host a town hall meeting or whatever, it's to cover the costs of the venue and so forth. And that would be director's expenses or community information, I believe. And then conferences and seminars, how is that different from director's expenses? So if we could have some clarification on those, thank you.
Okay, through the chair to Director Nicholson. The director's expenses, the 10,800 is for the appreciation, so it's the 1,200 times the 9. So that's what is in the director's expenses. So that's for every year that you can do your appreciation for your volunteers. Then, so for the next one, for the 9,000, this one is based on $9,000 per director for, so it's 9. And it's for the 2 conferences that are $500 or less that you can go to, that aren't like the UBCM, the AVICC, or the FCM. So that's where this falls into. So there's 2, so it's $1,000 for each director for that one. Does that clarify, or is that there? Do you? Yeah.
Can I speak, Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
So on the conferences and seminars, so that the $9,000, that's not for the AVICC thing? Sorry, I was still thinking of the previous one.
Yeah, through the chair to Director Nicholson, you were correct on that. It does not include the AVICC.
Okay, so then I think this is one line item where we might want to discuss whether $9,000, which is essentially $1,000 a person, I guess, is adequate, appropriate for doing any additional conferences and seminars to the standard ones that we do through the local government associations. And I personally think it's probably about right, but I don't know what other people think.
Can I jump in there for a minute? The only conferences that I've attended in addition to the AVIC, etc., is the Vancouver Island Economic Association ones, and that's the only one. I think there's a few. We could perhaps bring this down a little bit, but I don't think we hardly ever use as much as is in there anyway. Do we not, Ms. Bond? And then after that, I'll go to Director Morrison.
I'm just trying to line that one up. So through the chair to the chair. So doing the comparison, so like in 2019, it was 8,000, so 8,100. In 2020, it was 11,000. So, and then of course it drops down in 2021 because that was when COVID hit and there's not a lot of people going to conferences, and then a lot more stuff was available via virtual, so you didn't have to travel. But so I wouldn't drop it because now things are starting to open up again, and there is going to be more conferences and availability. So these are 2 that you do not have to come back to the board to ask for. These are 2 that you can sign up for and go to, and I believe it's part of the business expense policy that was brought through in December.
Director Morrison.
So I'm going back in the memory banks again here, but I'm pretty sure that the way the policy reads is we can, without prior approval, 2 up to $500, including registration, hotel, mileage, all of those things. So and except for maybe VIA, that's pretty limiting. So an addition to the policy was that you could exceed the 500, but you had to come to the board for the authorization, but you could not exceed the 1,000. So I'd suggest, as Ms. Bowen has recommended, that this is probably a number coming out of COVID, and a lot of organizations would probably want to get elected officials before them and attending various conferences, that this is probably a number we could stand pat with and see where we come out at the end of the year. I think we're going to be requested to be at more things, and this budget allows us some of that flexibility. Thank you.
Okay, carry on, Ms. Bowen, thank you.
And through the chair, I need to back up a bit on the 54,000. I'm in error. That should only be 6,000, not 9,000 per person, per electoral area director. Sorry, I made a mistake. The community information, it's 6,000, not 9. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that. So the next one is, we're going down as travel. And we dropped this one because just basing it on the last couple of years, it's been quite low. So it was dropped down to 54,000. So I'm not, or 5,400. So I'm not sure if anyone has any discussion on that one. And just on, sorry.
Sorry, Director Segal, go ahead.
Through the chair, maybe you were about to do this. I guess I'm just wondering what types of travel? Is this like us coming here for these meetings, or just to elaborate on that? Thank you.
Through the chair to Dr. Segal. So this one is just for the standard business, CVRD business. So the stuff when you travel to UBCM, VICC, or FCM, all of those are included in the budget further down. So that does not include that. This is just your conducting CVRD business. That's what this one's for.
Director Martman? Nope.
So the next one is telephone 2,000. They've dropped it. Not exactly why it was dropped, so I'd have to look into that if we were to investigate to see how much that should actually have been. Training and development, that's been non-active for quite a few years, so it's probably been rolled into one of the other GLs, so that's why it has no activity and there's no budget for it. Because we've moved it into the conference and seminars, and moved it down to the UBCM and other GLs.
Director Martman, go ahead.
So I think this is one that over the next few years might be exercised. I'm hoping would be exercised because of, I think not just myself, but other directors around the table could use, I think, expanding knowledge, expanding skills throughout, as we go through, trying to do this delicately. But in a way, I guess it's the idea of professional development. And so is this embedded somewhere else, or is it not? And if it is, where would we talk about it?
Through the chair to Director Martman, I'd have to look back in the history as to why it dropped off and where it got added into. More than likely, it's probably gone into that, the conference and seminars one is probably where it's moved into.
So if that one covers $500 for two asks per director, and and there's something generally we're going to have a orientation put on or something put on that's, around training, where would the funding come for that?
Through the chair to Director Martman. So one of the things about budgets is that they're just loose plans, and it's really the bottom line that counts. And so ultimately, if, from a category perspective, if you identify a training session that doesn't fall in easily into conferences, et cetera, you would just simply charge it to, what's it called, training. And then, as we manage the budget through the year, we would let you know when your balances are getting close to the ultimate bottom line on this account, on this, budget. And then what that does for us is then in a subsequent year, we have information about, okay, well, actually, this year, some money was used in training and other monies were used for conferences proper. So it's not necessarily overly restrictive about that. So you could reallocate funds during the year without much trouble. Within the budget. If it goes beyond the budget, then we would have to do some brainstorming about what other kinds of budgets may have general ledger categories that would meet the definition that you're spending in before going ahead with that. So.
Yeah, thank you. I think Ms. Gerald, if you want to jump in here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to To advise that, I mean, you are going to be having some training and development sessions this year. We have one scheduled in January on legal, and that is actually allocated through budget 325, which is electoral area community planning. And the justification for having it there, of course, is because it relates to your land use authority, but it could just as easily be sitting within your EA 250 budget. So I just wanted to share that there is money allocated, it's just not in the specific budget.
Good stuff, thank you. And Ms. Miles-Wilson?
Yeah, and just following up on that comment too, for instance, board orientation and that type of training would have found its way into the 100 function in meeting expenses and training and development for a full board. So there's multiple points at which that type of opportunity finds itself funded. So when we get into the full budget, we can have those conversations about where it might be best suited to be situated. But it's pulled from multiple areas.
And a follow-up, May?
Go ahead.
Thank you for that. I think if I was looking, well, I am looking at it from a layperson's perspective, and also I'm trying to look at it through a public perspective of, are we allocating any money towards training developments for EA directors? And at this point, we're not. And I guess that's the piece that I'm trying to make the point of.
Through the chair to Director Martman, a lot of that does fall into the conference and seminars, even though it's not called training and development. Yeah, so it's a wording.
Director Nicholson, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, we've had this conversation before. I think at one point it was thrown into conferences and seminars, but more importantly, I was hoping that our Director Martman would move his camera so I could see his face as opposed to his tummy. Thanks.
I don't know how to respond to that one. Director Morrison.
Thank you. And just briefly, and I'm really encouraged to hear Director Martman and others talk about, Director Nicholson talk about the importance of training and continuing education in these roles here. And we will have further discussion when we talk about AVICC, UBCM, FCM, and those are really, in my perspective, I've tried to take advantage of going to those and learning at those because they are the gold standard in the training. And I'd encourage everyone to ensure that they clear time in their calendar and that we as a group make sure that we've got the necessary resources for us to be able to go and learn and improve, our craft. And we'll have more discussion about that. And I think the $1,000 per director for the one-offs that we may have a particular interest in is probably sufficient for the purposes of this budget. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Director Morrison. Looking around, any more hands? No. Ms. Bond.
Okay, so the next. So miscellaneous equipment, we've dropped the budget because computers were bought last year for 2022. So now there's only 3,000 in there for 2023. Yeah, and.
Yeah, I think we talked about this one just now, yesterday.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. So we have purchased new equipment. There are some directors that they're larger laptops, and so for those that wanted to switch out equipment throughout this year for something with a little bit more functionality, more portable or a tablet, we can do that. We can repurpose the equipment and move it into other for staff in the organization. So the budget has been decreased, but our IT department has sourced other equipment options should the directors want to switch out that equipment. So we can talk more about that at a follow-up meeting, but we would need to increase this budget for those directors that would like to look at a different piece of equipment. Is there any questions on that? I can take it.
Nope, doesn't look
No.
like, oh, there is Director Nicholson, she's got her hand up.
Okay.
Hi, so this is like election expenses. It's one of those things that comes around mainly every 4 years. And I'm wondering how we manage the budgets to smooth that so it's not just a big hit on an election year.
Are you referring to the equipment purchases, Director Nicholson?
Yes, equipment purchases and election expenses.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we can budget for it incrementally throughout, or if that, like you say, it's a bit of a hit every cycle. Do you have a perspective on that one, Tracy? No? Yeah, we can take that back, Director Nicholson, and consider it, if you'd like that to be thought through, if it's an incremental charge or if it's every cycle. Okay, thank you.
Director Morrison.
I think Ms. Bowen's about to tell us that we do incrementally sock away money for elections for every 4 years, and we had a by-election or two in the last little while, which have sort of upset the apple cart. But I'm going to fully admit that this question about the technology that we use is sort of my fault that it's been brought up, because I'd grown accustomed to what we had before, and I'm finding this to be clunky and awkward, and you know, I'll tell you all that my wife went out and, because of my complaining, bought me a monster big curved monitor for my home office, which doesn't do me any good here. I was hoping for a laptop with a touchscreen and wasn't asked. So, you know, I'm hoping that if there are specific things that other directors are looking at, I would like a different setup than we have right now. There's an awful lot of wires and things to move around and things to go wrong. I would like something simple but very functional, and I'm kind of the guy that brought this to the CAO's attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Motson. I take your point, and I'm lucky. I've got some pretty fancy equipment at home. This one sits on a shelf somewhere while I use my own equipment, and this only comes out when I come to here. But for me, it's adequate. That's as much as I can say.
So through the chair to Director Morrison, yes, you're correct on that. We can budget a little bit to put away for the election, and we could just to smooth this out. I didn't look up the last year's and was discussed with Natalie, so there is a way we can do it.
Thank you, Ms. Bowen. What's next on there? Or let's see, it's been just over an hour. Does anybody want a short break for 5 or 10 minutes? Let's call it 10 minutes and come back. Buffering, folks, getting ready to start again. Welcome back, everybody. We're live again now. So, Miss Bowen, where did we get to? We were, I think, on training and development, miscellaneous computer software, that area down there?
Yes. So the computer software upgrade has decreased due to already computers updated. And then you have your general government allocation, which decreased, and then your GIS allocation, which increased. So those are the ones, the GIS, we will come back with information on that one for the chair. Yeah. Sundry expenses dropped down to the 25,000. This is the one I was referring to earlier with regards to the gas tax to the project that was funded. So now we're back down to 1,000. And the meeting expenses has dropped in half to 2,500. And as you can see, the years that they've used the 5,000, and that's because of meeting expenses and not having in person.
I've got Director Abbott, but first of all, can I just ask a general question there? Gas tax. Do you know if we're going to get any more of that stuff over the next? It would be nice. I'm kind of run out. Oh, was it? Oh.
Through the chair, to Director Hurston, they have not announced any new funding at this time. So not that I'm aware of at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And I think, is that okay, Director Abbott? Okay, we'll carry on then. Thank you.
So the meeting expenses, as I said, is dropped in half, and that was due to meetings being done during the day, so there's no food service and stuff like that, so it helped drop the costs of having meetings. And then contingency, we kept the same, and that's just like kind of an emergency kind of area, and we always put a little bit of contingency in every budget. So the next area that is the election expenses. So all of this is dropped down to zero. So it's going to be a whole section of nothing in there, and we wouldn't have anything show back up in there until the next election.
Yeah, and as I understand it, I think Director Morrison did point it out, we put money away for that every year so that we got plenty in reserve. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And then we have the alternate approval section as a contingency in case something in there happens, so that's there.
Mr. Chair.
So my apologies, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my piece of paper again.
Just for clarity purposes, I did speak with Ms. Bowen. I think the board has actually directed a plan or a policy like that to make sure that we have it.
Through the chair to Director Morrison, I'd have to find a spot within the budget to put that, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And that leads to another question, of course. If we are going to start allocating money, then that it's going to appear on here as an addition. So that 3% there that we're looking at the bottom there is going to rise.
You're correct on that. We'd have to see how much we would be able to base it on what we actually spent this year, take off what gets paid by the other municipalities back into this budget to cover the expenses.
Yeah.
And then figure out how much over the.
And again, for my own information and for those who might be listening there, do we get any kind of grant allocations or any help from the province or from the federal government on the elections, or is it strictly down to ourselves to get the money going?
Through to the chair, I'm not 100% sure on that one, and okay. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you. If we could find out, that would be good. Thank you.
Chair, I'd like to ask Ms. Bowen, what is the alternative approval?
That's fairly new for me.
So I'm going to take a stab at this one. Patrick, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So an alternate approval process is an assent voting process for initiatives that the board might want to put forward that require electoral approval, but they don't want to go through the cost and time of a referendum and or wait till the next election. And so the alternate approval process is one by which there needs to be a recognized collection of petition against signatures to a certain percentage. And if those aren't collected, then the initiative goes forward. And so we hold a little bit of money in reserve in case something comes up during the term which requires electoral approval, but again, don't want to spend on a referendum and or the issue is small enough that it doesn't bear requiring a referendum and or waiting for the next election. So,
if I may,
yeah, okay.
become quite familiar with the alternative approval process, but not through the CVRD, but through something that happened in Cowichan Bay. Okay. And I wonder if $1,000, it's like chump change. If you had to do an AAP, is that enough money?
That's not a question I can answer, but I will say that it's an approval process that is generally we steer away from and only use if we absolutely have to. So we don't try to budget a lot of money for that process.
And if I might opine, I would like to see the entire CVRD steer clear of AAPs.
So I'm not sure. We can take the question about what the costs of an AAP are away and come back to you with information on what they actually cost and whether or not this is enough. So.
Yeah, we're going down some dangerous ground. Mr. Robbins, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just backing up with regards to election expenses. So that is all tax requisition. So there is no levels of government that are subsidizing that process.
Okay. Director Morrison?
Just in regards to what Director Abbott's saying, it is not a popular means of getting assent from our communities. In my 14 years, I haven't had one for my electoral area. There's been some sub-regional ones. And yeah, there's other methods. And so we as directors can steer our board away from those, and I think we have done so for to a large extent.
Yes. That's all I could be said. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Thank you.
So the next section is, under that is the UBCM conference. So this is budgeted to have the 9 electoral area directors attend. So that all falls in with your expenses, your travel, the conference charges. And then the last one is the membership, is the actual membership to UBCM. So does anybody have any questions on that section?
Let me go first, and then I'll scan around here. The only one I think I've got to ask about, and just refresh my memories as far as FCM is concerned, and I think we discussed this a couple of days ago. Did we not, and probably Director Morrison would remember that, or perhaps even Mr. Robbins, did we not make direction that for FCM, it would be the chair and possibly the CAO and 3 directors who were selected, and then the next year it would be another 3, etc.? Or did we not go down that road?
I don't recall that, Mr. Chair, that that was a direction of the board.
Okay. Okay.
But we can certainly get back to what kind of direction you had with regards to FCM.
Yeah,
if there was any direction or policy established for FCM.
Yeah. There was some discussion on it as to whether it was as useful to us with all due respect, us lower levels as opposed to the higher levels, etc.
Correct.
But if we can have a look at that as far as the budget's concerned, that would be great. Thank you.
So then the next section is the AVICC, and that's again for the conference membership, travel, and that is for all 9 electoral area directors to attend that one. So they've included all the expenses to that. The last one is the FCM, and that was budgeted for 9 people, so 9 electoral area directors to attend. And this is where we would need to look into the change on the rotating 3 directors, rotating through it so everybody got a chance to go. I'd have to look back and bring that forward.
Any more questions on this particular part before Ms. Bowen moves ahead? No? Okay.
Okay, and I think it's so the last item is for the transfer to other functions, which is for the ortho to GIS for their projects. So that's where the 80,000, the 2 kind of cross each other off. Okay. And that is all the line by line items for that.
Director Nicholson.
Thank you. I would just like to go back to the issue of operating reserves. And I am wondering where we invest operating reserves.
Through the chair to Director Nicholson. Sorry, I missed that last little bit.
I am wondering where we invest operating reserve monies and whether it is invested locally in credit unions or if it is invested otherwise.
So the operating through the Director Nicholson, sorry. So the operating reserves sit within the Bank of Nova Scotia at the moment. We do have some investments with, I just lost it, MFA, sorry. We have money through there with the fossil fuels. We have money there, and we are looking to invest into another place to have like a ladder effect of money so that we have have it outside of the Scotia, but money just sits in Scotia right now, earning interest on that. We don't
Um,
really- And we do not, we don't treat it like capital reserves where we put money back into the capital reserve as interest because it's not, it doesn't have the interest applied to it.
Can I follow up?
Absolutely, go ahead.
So I am interested in making sure that the money that we have sitting in the bank is doing the best it can for the local community. And I am wondering, I imagine that you go out for a request for proposals on where you put your money on a regular basis, or anyway, I think that there are there would be maybe greater benefit if we were able to invest money that's just sitting in a bank locally. And I'm wondering if maybe at some point finance division could do bring back sort of our policies to the board and to have a discussion about that.
Through the chair to Director Nicholson, we do have an investment policy and that we are working on that and getting money diversified out. But yeah, we could bring something back to the board on where we're investing our money.
Thank you.
Director Morrison.
Yeah, thank you. And this is high finance, and were you not, Mr. Chair, the MFA rep? And so I can, let all the new directors know that this organization is really good at handling money and ensures that the dollars that are able to be invested with and held by MFA are dollars that should be invested with them. And I can tell you that the rating of MFA is unparalleled, I think, across the country. So that's a good place there. And I can tell you that just the smart people that we've had in finance have done some really good work around ensuring that the dollars that we have are being used effectively, so that, when we get those requests to go authorization for interim borrowing, that we actually do that a lot less than we used to. And it's because of our smart people in finance that are able to use the dollars that we have. And I hate hearing the characterization that we have money sitting in a bank, because I think it's a lot more fluid and a lot more actively and dynamically managed than we might think. So I, as a vote of confidence, I understand where Director Nicholson is going with this, but I think our finance people do a pretty spectacular job of making sure that the dollars are being used effectively. And we do also, take advantage of local investing and the likes with the Director Abbott, what's the term of the group you're with? The BC Social Procurement Initiative and local initiatives around that. So that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Director Morrison. And on the subject of the MFA, okay, Director Nicholson, I'll come to you next. I am the rep again this year. It's one of those organisations that really does an extremely good job, and I'll look into it to see if, as a guest, anyone else can attend. If it's not just the representatives, maybe attend just the seminars that they give on the one day, if it's allowed, because come in and listen to what they have to say, because they are very, very good. I'll ask the question and I'll get back to you. And if anybody wants to go, because it will be coming up again fairly soon, the annual general meeting, then it's well worth it. It's always in Victoria, one day down there, and well worth visiting and listening to what they have to say. And shall I look into that, or should somebody else? I can look into that. I'll ask the question. Director Abbott, I think, or was it Director Nicholson? Somebody had their hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I would really appreciate maybe a report from you to the board on, my understanding is that they've just hired a new sustainability person. And I think that it would be interesting to understand what their thinking and policies are around local investing and sustainability. So it would be worthwhile hearing from you, from what you know, and maybe they could come and do a presentation or something at some point. And I'm not at all criticizing our finance staff and what they do. I think it would be worthwhile to review what our approach and policy is on this on a regular basis. So I'd appreciate that information from them as well. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's a good idea because it's been a while since MFA came and gave a presentation to us, I think. So with all the new directors, certainly that would be a good idea. We'll get them to come down. I know they like the Cowichan Valley anyway, so. Director Martman.
So I have two questions. Sorry about my, sorry, Alison. I don't know if I can make this work. So first question is about the MFA, and you mentioned fossil fuels. Can you elaborate?
Through the chair to Director Martman, we'll have to get back to you on that because I do not have that information in front of me to go into detail exactly what it is. And
Don't know. That's a new one on me, actually. Have you got the answer to that one?
So I can tell you without hesitation that this is probably the biggest issue that MFA has been dealing with. And there are numerous groups that have members that sit on the AVIC, or the MFA board. The current AVICC president is one of the board members on, I think it's MFA, but I know through UBCM there has been substantial work done on the question of divestiture from fossil fuels and like complete divestiture versus a planned reduction and reallocation of resources that they manage. So I without revealing contents of reports that were provided to me at UBCM, I can say that this is a very big issue, that they are actively managing it, and they have heard loud and clear from the members, which is all of us, that holdings in fossil fuel and other dirty industries are being reduced and actively managed to the best benefit of the members. So work is happening, yes.
I'll look up the date of the next MFA meeting and let you know about that as well.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just thought I would
Absolutely.
point out that staff have taken note that a look at the investment policy and some more information about our investment strategy is definitely something the board is looking for at this time, but it's not necessarily part of budget deliberations, and so it's probably best left until after budget deliberations, but certainly I've made a note and will provide the information and make sure there's a space for the discussion. So.
Good, thank you very much. Yes, Director Martman.
Thank you. I don't mean to put people on the spot, and I apologize if I am, because I find that we leave this, it's sort of a bit of a domino for me. Once we knock one domino over, there's another one standing up and I want to knock over. So this is part of my game and shit. The second question I had was that since we've gone through the Function 250 budget and I see 3.12% increase to requisition, the other part of me that wants to knock the next domino over is I want this to go to zero, or I want to see it go down. But I'm feeling like I'm sort of like Director Morrison is, it's in isolation. And I wanted to see how can, as electoral areas, we can functionally or practically absorb all the information that we're spending in electoral areas and see what we can do to reduce the budget or reduce the numbers that are in some of those budgets. So how do we do this next?
through the chair to Director Martman. So next Thursday, on the 12th, we will be bringing all the electoral area services budgets to you. So the reports will be going out this week. And we're updating our website today with attachments for all of those functions, so you can start looking at it. So, and then tomorrow we will be presenting the overall budget percentage and how that is working. But it would be at those at the meeting on the 12th. There's a meeting on the 26th where you would be able to change budget information at that time.
Any further? Director Segal.
Through the chair, I'm just wondering the 3.12% increase, how does that compare to previous years? Is that kind of like normal, every year it increases that much, or different?
Through the chair to Director Siegel, I would have to get a history for you, but we try to stay within the mandates, and this year we were not provided one. Last year we were provided 3%. Year before that was a 0, but I could see, I have to look back to see how it actually affected. Once all the budgets were done, we never really go back to get to the actual year-over-year ones to see what the percentage change would be on all those, but I could try and bring something together for you to see what we started out with.
Director Abbott. Oh. Director Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just a note to finance, and I know we're discussing 250, but we've also, I'm just giving you a heads up that, and I think I discussed it with Ms. Wayner, and I don't know that you would be aware of the, one of the items for, that will affect everything is assessment, and we'll discuss assessment tomorrow, I'm sure. I'm looking for a little bit more detail, and I can't remember the schedule number, but I'm hoping that we can have comparators and percentages to previous years on the schedule that has the assessment breakdown. So that's just a heads up for, well, not tomorrow, but at some point in the future, because that's a helpful document for some of us.
So through the chair to Director Morrison, we're still waiting for the reports to come available to us. So the presentation we're doing tomorrow will be based on the 2022 revised. We do not have any new updated ones. Once we get it, we're going to try and update as fast as we can with everything else that we're doing to get the new information in with, yes, because we've heard all the stuff on the news. So yes, we will try and get it as updated and up onto the website as fast as we can with the new numbers. And we do have those in our notes to provide those nice worksheets that we worked on last year, to provide those to the board again this year.
I've got one of those. I've got one that goes back to 2012, and it actually shows the actual CVRD rates over the last 12 years, 10 years or so, plus what it actually works out to once everything else, police tax, school tax, everything else is added in. So I'll send you a copy of that one sometime. Okay, thank you. What's next? Director McClinton, did I see your hand up? Yeah, I did not. Okay. Anyone else? No. Carry on, Ms. Bowen. Okay. We're going to go through it. I think your mic is off. There you go.
Sorry. So this just shows the change of the requisition from 2022 to 2023 and the areas of where the changes occurred. So that's where it comes up to the 3.2. And then at the bottom, this has a supplemental item that will be brought to the board or to the committee on the 19th for discussion at that time. And then that, if that gets approved, that will bring you up to the 9.1. Yeah, so that bottom one, the supplemental, is not an item that is approved at this time. So does anybody have any questions on that? You can see like in the middle section there on B where we have the change with regards to the election, and then the money that was covering it is out, and that's why that's a 0, because it's a wash kind of between the two. So does anybody have any questions?
I can see you're cogitating there, Ben, Director Martin.
Sure.
Shall I give you a couple of minutes, or a couple of seconds rather?
Chair.
Okay.
Chair Wilson to Ms. Bowen. We're not allowed to talk about item D?
through the chair to Director Abbott, this will be brought with more detail for you when you come on the 19th. You'll get the whole, be able to see, we've put the report out and we'll have the attachment to it, and then you'll be able to get more detail on it. Right now, it's just a number. It's not, there's no detail to provide at this time.
Go ahead, Director Martin. Director Morrison first, and then I'll come back to you.
So, yeah, thank you. And I don't want to start venturing into tomorrow's meetings and future meetings. And just so that I'm understanding this, the supplementals are essentially staff-driven. And the reason why I'm posing the question is there has been some discussion about support on for electoral area directors. I didn't see that anywhere within the system, so I'm just sort of giving you the heads up that I will probably be asking that question, and we will likely need some HR to come up with some numbers around what sort of position that would be and those kind of expenses. I don't know that there's been an official resolution directing staff to include it in core, but it's something that I would like to have discussion on anyways. Thank you.
I can answer, Mr. Chair.
I'm picking away on this old calculator of mine there, trying to work out if it is actually 3.1%. I'm sure it is, but yeah, sorry. Ms. Miles-Wilson.
Sorry, just in response to the director's comments and question. As I understand it, the end, which will be presented tomorrow to committee, the supplementals are tied to different board endorsed plans, asset management plan, strategic plan, definitely all tied to initiatives that are kind of in the queue, so to speak. But we are facing a challenging budget year, so it's recognized that not all of those items will possibly be funded, which is why tomorrow, just as a heads up, the senior management team has rated the supplementals to try to help the board make those tough decisions. And this is one of the items on there in the staffing component.
Director Abbott.
Can we get a copy of that rating? It's a lot of ink to print that document at home.
I will message our executive assistant and get her to make some copies for you. Yeah.
Thank you. And Director Martin.
Thank you. So I'm looking through and trying to see where this budget might get pared down. And looking at the requisition increase, and I think this is where you're going to come back about the FCM, because I see that's $48,000 for the FCM total budget. And if it's going to knock it down to 1/3 of the directors attending, then I would think we would get 1/3 of the cost of that budget, roughly. So 16,000 would be the budget, not 48, which would mean $32,000, my math. Which would drop our requisition down to 0. If there's some assumptions there, but that's roughly would be the impact.
Yeah, so through the chair to Director Martman, we can figure out what that would be, but then there's also, as Danielle brought up earlier, with regards to purchasing of new computers, you would have to budget that in, so then you would have to increase from another section if that was to occur. So we could, but we can figure out what that would look like for you if you drop your FCM down to the 3 after we investigate that.
Anybody else? Let's have a look around. I think that's about it as far as you're concerned, Ms. Bowen, or have we got further ones to go through? Good. Thank you very much, Ms. Bowen. That's good stuff, giving us a lot to think about. Director Morrison.
So looking to the staff report, thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking to the staff report, it's the recommended resolution is for direction. I don't think you want us trying to craft an on-the-fly resolution, but is staff heard and taken enough notes and got what you need so that we can just move on and those suggestions, recommendations, and ideas will come forward at future meetings, correct?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it in a nutshell. The direction I think has been given that we need to look at other bits and pieces there. Do we need a formal resolution? No? Good. Good, thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. What's next on the agenda? Have we finished with that one? Question period. What's going beep? Is it me?
I didn't hear.
There it is.
Somebody remotely is playing with their microphone. Yes, Mr. Chair, you're into section 4, question period. There is nobody here with you this afternoon, no one online for that, which moves you to item number 5, adjournment.
Well, that went through very quickly all of a sudden. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Martman. All in favour? Any opposed? Good.